When the HOA padlocked my ranch gate, they thought they'd finally force me to sell my family's century-old property. Little did they know, I'd been planning for this moment for months. That shiny new gate wasn't just an eyesore to them, it was a legal trap they walked right into. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching, also like and subscribe for more stories. The weather-beaten, "No trespassing" sign swung in the wind as I stared at the brand new padlock on my ranch gate. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my pickup truck so hard my knuckles turned white. The Sweetwater Ranch Homeowners Association had crossed the line. This wasn't just another petty rule violation notice, they had physically locked me out of my own property. "Those smug city slicker bureaucrats," I muttered, reaching for my phone to call Richard Hoffman, the HOA president who had tormented me since I bought this land 3 years ago. My 50-acre ranch sat at the edge of what used to be open Texas countryside before developers moved in and built the Sweetwater Ranch community, a collection of cookie-cutter houses with perfectly manicured lawns surrounding my property like vultures circling prey. The phone rang 5 times before Hoffman's voicemail kicked in. Typical. He never answered my calls but was quick enough to send violation notices for my unsightly tractor or the hay bales stacked near the fence line. "Mr. Hoffman, this is Jack Reeves. You've put a lock on my gate. Remove it immediately or I'll remove it myself. You have 1 hour." I ended the call, knowing full well he wouldn't comply. What the HOA didn't know was that I had anticipated this move for months. They thought they had me cornered, but the gate was actually a trap I had carefully planned. It wasn't the first battle in our war, but if my plan worked, it would be the last. 3 months earlier, I sat in the back of the crowded community center during the monthly HOA meeting. As usual, I was the odd one out among the suburban professionals in their business casual attire. My worn jeans and work boots marked me as different, a fourth-generation rancher among people who thought country living meant having a large backyard. Next on the agenda, Hoffman announced with practiced authority, is the ongoing issue of the Reeves property. All heads turned toward me. I nodded politely, keeping my face neutral despite the rising heat in my chest. "The board has received numerous complaints about the appearance and activities on Mr. Reeves' ranch," Hoffman continued. "Specifically, the equipment visible from Sweetwater Drive, livestock odors, and most recently, the construction of an unauthorized entrance gate." I raised my hand. "That gate is on my property line, not community property." Hoffman adjusted his glasses. "According to our bylaws, all external structures visible from community roads must be approved by the Architectural Committee." "My ranch predates your community by 80 years, I replied evenly. "My property was grandfathered in with special exceptions when your developer bought the surrounding land." "Nevertheless," Hoffman pressed, "your deed includes certain covenants you agreed to when purchasing the property. The original entrance was approved. This new one was not." Sarah Chin, a newer board member I'd had pleasant exchanges with, spoke up. "Perhaps we could work out a compromise? If Mr. Reeves submits plans retroactively?" Hoffman shook his head. "We've been down this road before. Mr. Reeves consistently ignores our notices and regulations." That wasn't entirely true. I had tried to comply with reasonable requests, but their demands had become increasingly intrusive. They wanted me to move my workshop because it was an eyesore, repaint my barn a more suitable color, and limit my cattle to the back pastures away from their precious views. After the meeting, I consulted with my lawyer, Marissa Johnson, who specialized in property disputes. "They're trying to squeeze you out, Jack," she said, reviewing the latest violation notice. "They want your land for the next phase of development. Classic strategy, make life so difficult that selling becomes the easiest option." "Not happening," I said firmly. "My grandfather built this ranch. My father died working this land. I'm not selling." Marissa leaned forward. "Then we need to be strategic. I've been researching their bylaws and your original deed. There are inconsistencies we can exploit." That conversation planted the seed for what would become my master plan. If the HOA wanted to play hardball, I would show them they were in the minor leagues. The plan began with understanding my enemy. Richard Hoffman wasn't just an overzealous HOA president. He was a real estate investor with ties to the development company that built Sweetwater Ranch. Through careful research and a few conversations with friendly neighbors, I discovered that Phase 3 of development had stalled because my property stood in the way of their planned luxury section. Next came the legal groundwork. Marissa helped me file for historical property designation with the county, citing the ranch's century-old structures and agricultural significance. I also submitted applications for agricultural tax exemptions and environmental conservation programs. While the paperwork moved through the system, I made strategic improvements to my property. I painted the barn, not the beige they demanded, but a tasteful rustic red that matched historical photographs of the original structure. I moved equipment behind newly planted screening trees and improved the cattle rotation to minimize odor near property lines. These visible improvements served two purposes. They showed good faith efforts to maintain the property and, more importantly, they distracted from my real moves. The new gate was the centerpiece of my plan. I hired a professional contractor, not the cheap option most ranchers would choose, but a high-end designer whose portfolio included entrances for exclusive estates and country clubs. The wrought iron gate with stone columns was both functional and beautiful, complementing the landscape while meeting all security requirements. I made sure to schedule the installation when most residents were at work, but I knew someone would report it. Within hours, I received an email demanding I remove the unauthorized structure. Instead of arguing, I responded with a polite request for a hearing before the architectural committee, buying time while the next phase of my plan unfolded. When the hearing date arrived, I dressed in my best suit, something the board had never seen me wear. I brought professional architectural renderings, historical documentation, and a carefully prepared presentation. While I understand your concerns, I began after they denied my request, I believe there's been a misunderstanding about the property boundaries and jurisdiction. I presented surveys showing that the gate stood on a section of private access road that, according to county records, was not actually part of the HOA's common areas. Marissa had discovered this discrepancy in the original development plans. Furthermore, I continued, as this documentation shows, my ranch operates under agricultural use provisions that exempt certain structures from standard residential restrictions. Hoffman's face reddened. That's a matter of interpretation. Our bylaws clearly state. I've also taken the liberty of filing these documents with the county, I interrupted smoothly, sliding copies across the table. They've confirmed my interpretation is correct. This wasn't entirely true, the county hadn't made an official determination yet, but the statement created exactly the doubt I needed. Board member Sarah Chen studied the papers with a frown. Richard, these surveys do seem to contradict our maps. Irrelevant, Hoffman snapped. The covenant restrictions apply to the entire property regardless of access road technicalities. I smiled politely. I thought you might say that, which is why I've also filed for a historical property designation. The application specifically cites the original ranch entrance, which I've simply restored to its historical appearance. The meeting ended with no resolution, exactly as I planned. I needed them frustrated but uncertain, enough to make a mistake. In the weeks that followed, the conflict escalated. Anonymous complaints about my property multiplied. A building inspector showed up to check permits for structures built decades before permits were required in the county. Someone even called animal control about my perfectly healthy livestock. I weathered each attack calmly while continuing my legal maneuvers behind the scenes. The historical designation was approved. The county clarified the boundary issues in my favor. The agricultural exemptions were granted. But the HOA wasn't backing down. They increased my fines for non-compliance and threatened legal action. Then came their biggest mistake. A certified letter arrived stating that due to unpaid fines and ongoing violations that impact community safety and values, they would restrict my access to the property until the issues were resolved. I called Marissa immediately. They took the bait. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" she asked. "We could settle the boundary dispute and be done with it." "They want my land," I replied. "They won't stop until they get it or I stop them for good." She sighed. "I'll have everything ready. Just give me the word." Which brings me back to that padlocked gate. I sat in my truck, watching the minutes tick by on my dashboard clock. As expected, Hoffman didn't call back or show up to remove the lock. After exactly 1 hour, I pulled out bolt cutters from behind my seat and approached the gate. Just as I positioned them on the padlock, a black SUV pulled up. Hoffman emerged, accompanied by 2 members of the board and a uniformed security guard. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Reeves," Hoffman called out. "Destruction of HOA property is grounds for legal action." I lowered the bolt cutters but didn't put them down. "This is my gate on my property. You've illegally prevented me from accessing my home and livelihood. The HOA has authority to enforce its rules," he replied smugly. "Your continued violations have left us no choice." I pulled out my phone. "Marissa, are you getting this?" My lawyer's voice came through the speaker. "Crystal clear, Jack. Mr. Hoffman, this is Marissa Johnson representing Mr. Reeves. Are you aware that you're currently committing criminal trespass and false imprisonment by preventing my client from accessing his property? Hoffman scoffed. The HOA bylaws give us no authority whatsoever to lock someone out of their private property, Marissa interrupted. Furthermore, we have confirmation from the county that this access road and gate are not within HOA jurisdiction. That's being disputed, Hoffman retorted. Not anymore, I said, reaching into my truck for a folder. These came this morning. Official determination from the county that my property boundaries are exactly as I've claimed, and my gate is fully permitted and authorized. I handed copies to each person present, saving Hoffman's for last. His face paled as he scanned the documents. There's more, I continued. The sheriff's department is very interested in the pattern of harassment my property has experienced. Trespassing, false reports to county officials, and now physically barring access to a legally operated agricultural business. On cue, a sheriff's department vehicle pulled up behind Hoffman's SUV. Deputy Collins stepped out, nodding to me before addressing Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman? We received a complaint about illegal restriction of access to private property. Can you explain why this gate is padlocked? Hoffman sputtered. This is an HOA matter? It's a potential criminal matter, Deputy Collins corrected. Interfering with agricultural operations is taken seriously in this county. While Hoffman argued with the deputy, I turned to the other board members. There's an easy way to end this. I have no desire to see anyone arrested or sued personally. Sarah Chin stepped forward. What are you proposing? I handed her another document. This is a revised agreement clarifying the boundaries between my ranch and Sweetwater Ranch community properties. It explicitly states that my land is exempt from HOA architectural and land use restrictions while establishing reasonable standards for maintenance of shared boundary areas. She skimmed the document. This actually seems fair. I've always been willing to be a good neighbor, I replied. I just won't be bullied off my land. Hoffman returned, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. The deputy says we need to remove the lock immediately. Or he'll be happy to remove it himself and take statements for criminal charges, I added helpfully. The security guard, looking uncomfortable, produced a key and unlocked my gate. Thank you, I said, swinging it open. Now, about the agreement I just showed Ms. Chen. 2 months later, I sat on my porch watching the sunset over my pastures. The new agreement had been ratified by the full HOA membership, with Hoffman notably absent from the meeting. He had resigned his position shortly after our confrontation, citing personal reasons. Rumors suggested his connections to the development company had become public knowledge, creating a conflict of interest that threatened his professional reputation. The development plans for Phase 3 had been modified to work around my property rather than through it. My ranch was now legally recognized as an agricultural heritage site, protected from future encroachment. Sarah Chin, the new HOA president, had proven to be a reasonable neighbor. Under her leadership, the relationship between the ranch and community had improved significantly. Some residents even brought their children to see the horses on weekends. As twilight deepened, I smiled at the wrought iron gate standing open at the end of my drive. What had begun as a trap had transformed into a symbol of hard-won victory. The gate that was meant to keep me out now stood as a boundary that no one would dare cross without respect. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, but about making it impossible for them to destroy you. My ranch would continue for another generation, just as my grandfather had intended, not despite the modern world encroaching on its borders, but standing proudly alongside it on my own terms.